Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. The cold sweat trickled down Amina's back as she stepped into the dimly lit underground arena. The stale smell of smoke, sweat, and anticipation filled the air. Around her, the crowd's voices rose like a wave, some jeering, some cheering, but most just waiting for blood. She paused for a moment at the edge of the ring, her heart pounding hard enough to echo in her ears. The ropes looked worn and frayed. The floor beneath was scratched and stained from years of fights, and at the far corner, towering over her with a cruel grin, stood the champion, 220 pounds of raw power, muscle rippling under. His skin. He laughed, loud and mocking. "You? They want me to fight her? This'll be easy!" The crowd laughed with him. Amina swallowed the lump in her throat. She had never wanted any of this. She wasn't a fighter. She was a quiet woman who lived a simple life, caring for her sick mother and working long hours just to pay the bills. But that night, everything had changed. It started weeks ago when the debt collectors came knocking. Again, the loan sharks, who didn't care about her kindness or her struggles. They only cared about money. Her father's debts, unpaid and mounting, were now her burden. Her so-called friends had turned their backs on her, whispered behind her back, and finally handed her over to the worst of them. Make her pay, they said. Make her an example. Now she stood here, forced into a fight that could destroy her. Amina's mind raced back to the day it all fell apart. She had been walking home late from the factory, her tired feet dragging on cracked sidewalks. Her mother's fragile health was a constant worry, and every penny she earned was needed for medicine and food. That night, two men blocked her path in a dark alley, their faces unreadable in the shadows. "Where's the money, Amina?" one asked, voice low and threatening. "I don't have it," she said softly, trying to sound steady. The other man stepped closer. "You know what happens if you don't pay." Her heart clenched. They didn't need to say it. She tried to back away, but the alley was narrow. The men closed in, smirking. She felt helpless, small. Then came the call. The loan shark's voice was cold, dripping with menace. "Listen, girl, we don't want your money anymore. We want your fight." "What fight?" she whispered, confused. "You heard me. You owe us. You lose, you pay with more than cash." The line went dead. Amina dropped the phone, tears blurring her vision. She had no choice. For days she trained in the basement of an old gym, under the watchful eyes of brutal men who showed her no mercy. Her hands ached, her body screamed in pain, but she kept going. There was no escape. She learned to block punches, to dodge, to strike, but every hit she took felt like a reminder of all she had lost. Her dreams, her dignity, her quiet life. Now, standing in the ring, all of that felt distant. All that mattered was the fight. The whistle blew, the champion lunged, Amina's muscles tensed. Time slowed. She saw the opening, a tiny gap in his defense. She struck. Her fist connected with the side of his jaw. The crowd gasped. The champion staggered, then collapsed. For a moment, silence, then chaos. The crowd erupted into shouts, some in shock, others in anger. The champion's men rushed forward, shouting threats. Amina's chest heaved with breath, her mind swirling. She had done the impossible. But at what cost? From the shadows, a voice whispered, "They won't let this go. You've made powerful enemies." Her eyes scanned the crowd. Faces she recognized, friends who had betrayed her, men who wanted her broken. Her fight was just beginning. The roar of the crowd faded behind her as Amina stumbled out of the ring, her body shaking from the adrenaline and exhaustion. The dim basement gym seemed to close in around her, the weight of what had just happened pressing on her chest like a heavy stone. She had knocked out the undefeated champion with a single punch, a feat no one had expected. But now, as the cheers turned to angry murmurs and threats, she felt something else, fear. The men who ran this fight circuit were not the forgiving kind. The champion she had defeated was the favorite of a powerful group. People who didn't take kindly to being humiliated, especially not by a quiet woman who no one had taken seriously. They would want revenge, and Amina was painfully aware that her life could be in danger. Her hands trembled as she wiped the sweat and blood from her face. She wanted to run, but the same shadows from that night before haunted her. The debt, the betrayal, the promises of violence. "Get her out of here," a gruff voice ordered behind her. Two burly men appeared and grabbed her arms roughly. Amina tried to resist, but their grip was ironclad. She was dragged through the narrow corridors, past the angry crowd, still buzzing with disbelief and fury. Outside, the cold night air hit her like a shock. She gasped for breath, the reality of what she'd just done sinking in. The fight was never meant to be hers. It was a trap, a cruel game to break. And yet against all odds, she had won. She was thrown into a run-down van. The stench of gasoline and sweat filled the cramped space as the door slammed shut. Her captors spoke in low tones, but Amina's mind raced too fast to listen. Who were they? What did they want next? The van lurched forward, taking her away from the only place she had ever known. As the city lights blurred past, Amina's thoughts went back to the people she once called friends. The ones who had smiled and laughed with her, only to betray her when the debts came due. She had trusted them, shared secrets, and counted on their support during the hardest times. But when the loan sharks demanded payment, those friends had vanished. Worse, they had handed her over to the very men who threatened to destroy her. She clenched her fists, tears burning her eyes. How could they do this to her? The van stopped outside a large, dilapidated warehouse on the edge of town. The men pushed her out roughly, and she stumbled onto the cracked concrete. Inside, harsh fluorescent lights revealed a grim scene. Men in suits and leather jackets paced the room, their faces hard and unforgiving. They were the real bosses, the ones who pulled the strings behind the fights, the debts, the punishments. One man stepped forward. His eyes were cold and calculating. "You embarrassed us tonight," he said slowly. "You humiliated the champion, and by extension, all of us." Amina met his gaze, refusing to look away. "I did what I had to do," she said quietly. He laughed, a dark, cruel sound. "You don't get to decide that." For hours they interrogated her, demanding answers. Threats veiled behind polite words. They wanted to know who had helped her, who had trained her, if she had a secret plan. But Amina had no answers, no allies, no one but herself. Finally, the leader leaned closer. "You have one choice: pay your debt, or fight again." The words hit her like a hammer. Fight again. They wanted to use her, turn her into their weapon, a puppet to control with fear. But Amina was no longer just a scared girl. She was becoming something else, something dangerous. As the night dragged on, she thought about her mother waiting at home. The sick woman who depended on her, the life she wanted but could no longer reach. If she refused, she would lose everything. And she agreed she might lose herself. She looked up, eyes blazing. "I fight," she said. A silence fell over the room. The leader smiled. "Good. We will see if you can survive the next fight. And if you win, maybe you earn your freedom." Back in her small apartment, Amina barely recognized herself. Her hands were swollen and bruised. Her body ached in places she didn't know could hurt. But her spirit was stronger than ever. She had survived the impossible once. She would do it again. But the road ahead was dark. Danger lurked in every shadow, and the people who betrayed her were closer than she thought. Cliffhanger. One night, as she returned home after a secret training session, Amina found a note slipped under her door. It read, "Simply, we're watching. One wrong move and you're finished." Her heart raced. The fight was no longer just about money or survival. It was about trust and betrayal. The days that followed were a blur of training, tension, and silent fear. Amina's life became a delicate balance between preparing for her next fight and trying to protect the fragile peace at home with her mother. The note slipped under her door haunted her. "We're watching. One wrong move, and you're finished." The threat was clear, and it kept her on edge. But Amina was no stranger to hardship. Every morning before dawn, she pushed herself harder than the day before. The makeshift gym in the basement was her sanctuary and her prison. The punching bag bore the marks of her frustration, her anger, and her determination. She shadowboxed in front of the cracked mirror, eyes blazing with a fierce intensity that surprised even herself. She wasn't just fighting for money anymore. She was fighting for her dignity, her mother's survival, and the chance to reclaim her life. Her trainer, an older man named Karim, had seen many fighters come and go, but he had never seen one like Amina. She was raw, unpolished, and yet her spirit burned bright. Karim had taken a special interest in her, pushing her beyond limits and teaching her not just how to throw a punch, but how to control her fear. "You have to control the fight inside you," Karim said one evening, wiping the sweat from his brow. "If you lose your mind, you lose everything." Amina nodded silently. She understood that lesson better than most. The fight inside her was more dangerous than any opponent in the ring. The looming threat from the debt collectors weighed on her like a shadow. She had no illusions about the world she was now part of. The fight circuit was brutal and unforgiving, and the people who ran it even more so. One night, as Amina left the gym, she noticed a dark sedan parked across the street. Two men sat inside, their faces obscured by shadows. Her pulse quickened. She crossed the street quickly, trying to avoid their gaze, but she knew it was only a matter of time before they made their move. She hurried home, locking every door behind her. Her mother looked up from her chair, worry etched across her tired face. "Are you all right?" her mother asked softly. Amina forced a smile. "I'm fine, just tired." But inside she was anything but fine. The next fight was scheduled just days away. Amina had no choice but to accept. The debt collectors had made it clear. Winning meant survival. Losing meant losing everything. The opponent was a brutal man named Victor, known for his ruthless style and cold demeanor. He was a test not just of strength, but of will. The night of the fight arrived, and the underground arena was packed tighter than before. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, many doubting Amina's chances. Whispers of her previous upset victory had spread, but few believed it could happen twice. As she stepped into the ring, the bright lights blinded her momentarily. Victor's cold eyes met hers, sizing her up with a sneer. The bell rang. Victor came at her with a fury that nearly overwhelmed her. His fists flew like thunder, and she barely managed to dodge the first blows. Pain exploded in her ribs when a punch connected, but she gritted her teeth and kept moving. The fight was a blur of sweat, pain, and raw determination. Every strike she threw was fueled by the memories of betrayal, the fear for her mother's safety, and the desperate hope for freedom. Karim's voice echoed in her mind. "Control the fight inside you." Despite the beating she took, Amina found her rhythm. She dodged and weaved, landing a solid punch to Victor's jaw. The crowd gasped. The fight was far from over, but something inside her shifted. She wasn't just fighting to survive. She was fighting to win, and for the first time she believed she could. Suddenly, from the shadows, she caught sight of a familiar face. One of the men who had betrayed her, sitting smugly in the front row. His eyes locked onto hers, and she saw no remorse, only cruelty. Her blood boiled. Fueled by a surge of anger, she pushed harder, throwing punches with renewed vigor. Victor staggered. She seized the moment, delivering a powerful blow that sent him crashing to the mat. The crowd erupted. As the referee counted, Amina stood panting, her heart pounding. When the count reached 10, she was declared the winner. But victory felt hollow. She knew the fight outside the ring was far from over. Backstage, as she caught her breath, A voice whispered in her ear, "You've made enemies tonight. There. I'm coming for you." It was Karim. Amina nodded grimly. "I'm ready." That night, as she lay awake, the walls of her apartment seemed to close in. The threat was real, and the price of failure was unimaginable, but somewhere deep inside, a new strength was rising. Amina was no longer just a quiet woman. She was a fighter, and she would not be broken. Cliffhanger. The next morning, a package arrived at her door. Inside was a simple note. "We know where you live. Stop fighting, or we'll take everything." Amina's hands trembled as she held the note. Her next move would decide everything. The days passed like a storm for Amina. Every shadow outside her door, every unexpected knock felt like a threat. The note, "We know where you live. Stop fighting, or we'll take everything," was a constant reminder of the stakes. She knew backing down was impossible. Not after everything she had endured. Not after the fights, the pain, and the betrayals. But the danger was real, closing in on her from every side. Karim came to her small apartment that evening, his face grave but determined. "You need to get out of here," he said. "They're planning something. I've heard things." Amina looked at him, eyes tired but fierce. "I can't run anymore. I have to end this." Karim nodded, understanding the fire inside her. "Then we prepare. One last fight." The final fight was set in a larger, more dangerous arena. One where the stakes were higher and the crowd darker. The people behind the scenes were ruthless, and the man she faced now was no ordinary opponent. His name was Malik, a fighter known for brutality and a cold heart. Rumors whispered that he worked for the very men who wanted Amina silenced. If she lost, it wouldn't just mean defeat. It would mean disappearing forever. Amina's heart hammered as she stepped into the ring, the lights blinding and the crowd roaring. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a battle for her life. Malik wasted no time. He attacked with merciless force, his punches like thunder. Amina dodged and weaved, her body screaming with every blow. The memories of her mother's fragile health, the betrayal of friends, and the weight of debt drove her forward. With every hit she took, she found new strength. With every punch she landed, she reclaimed a piece of her soul. The fight was brutal and unforgiving. The crowd's cheers and jeers mixed into a roaring storm around her. Time seemed to slow as Malik closed in for a final blow. But Amina was ready. She remembered Karim's words, "Control the fight inside you." With a deep breath, she dodged Malik's strike and delivered a powerful uppercut that rocked him. The arena fell silent. Malik staggered, eyes wide with shock, then collapsed. The referee counted 1, 2, 3, 10. Amina was the victor. The crowd erupted in stunned applause. But the fight wasn't over. Behind the cheers, the shadowy figures who controlled the debts and the fights were watching. One of them stepped forward, clapping slowly. "You've won," he said coldly. "But the price is higher than you think." Amina's chest tightened. She knew this wasn't just about the fights anymore. It was about power, control, her life. Suddenly, security guards surrounded the ring. The man approached Amina, offering, "A deal. Walk away. Leave the debts, the fights, the danger behind. We will erase your record, protect your family, but you must disappear from this world." Amina looked around, seeing the faces of the crowd, the bruises on her body, and the frightened look in her mother's eyes. She thought of the quiet life she had lost, the simple dreams she once had, and the fierce woman she had become. "I won't disappear," she said firmly. Her voice was steady, filled with strength. "I will fight, not just for myself, but for everyone like me, who have been broken and forgotten." The crowd cheered louder. That night, Amina returned home to her mother. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. They sat together in the small apartment, the weight of fear lifting slowly. Her mother reached out, holding Amina's hands. "You are stronger than I ever imagined," she said softly. Tears filled Amina's eyes. In the weeks that followed, Amina used her winnings to pay off her family's debts. She found work that was honest and steady, far from the shadows of the underground fights. Her story spread quietly, an inspiring tale of courage, resilience, and the fight for dignity. Though the scars on her body would never fully fade, Amina's spirit was unbreakable. She had faced darkness, betrayal, and fear, and emerged victorious. Final reflection. Amina's journey was more than a fight in the ring. It was a battle against despair, a testament to the strength that lies within even the quietest souls, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come from the hardest struggles. The end.